I drove 27 miles to celebrate my daughter's marriage, and she told me there was no room for me. The words still sit heavy in my chest, because I remember exactly how the evening air felt when I stepped out of my car, like something was already wrong and I just had not caught up to it yet. The restaurant stood there glowing under warm lights, all glass and polished stone, the kind of place that charges more for a plate than I used to spend on groceries in a week. I straightened my jacket before walking in, not because it was expensive, but because it was the best one I owned, pressed carefully that morning like it mattered. Inside, the lobby buzzed with soft laughter and the clinking of glasses, and for a moment I thought I had made it just in time. I gave my name to the host, Michael Turner, and watched his eyes move across the screen, then stop, then move again slower this time, like he was looking for something that was not there. His smile changed, not rude, not exactly, but practiced, distant. He said, "I am sorry, sir, but we are at capacity tonight." I thought he meant I was early, or that there had been some confusion, so I told him I was here for Olivia Brooks, my daughter, her anniversary dinner. That was when he hesitated, just a fraction too long, and then said it again, softer this time. "We are full." And then I saw her. Olivia was standing just a few feet behind him, dressed in a way that made her look like she belonged in that room, like she had always belonged there. She looked at me, and for a second I saw something flicker in her eyes, something familiar, something that reminded me of the little girl who used to run to the door when I came home late from work. But it vanished just as quickly. She stepped forward, not close enough to touch me, just close enough for her voice to reach me without raising it. "Dad?" she said, her tone calm, controlled, almost careful. "Please do not make this awkward. We planned this for a specific group." I remember standing there, my hand still resting on the counter, feeling the smooth surface under my fingers while everything else felt unsteady. Around us, people were starting to notice. A couple near the bar turned their heads, not fully, just enough to see. Someone laughed in the distance, not at me, but it landed that way anyway. I looked past Olivia into the dining room, saw the long table set with white linens, candles already lit, glasses arranged in perfect lines, and I realized there was a seat for everyone except me. I did not argue. I did not raise my voice. I just stood there, taking in the details, the way her husband Ethan kept his distance, the way he did not even pretend to recognize me, the way the host avoided my eyes now that the truth had settled into the room. I had driven 27 miles thinking I was part of something, and in less than a minute, I understood I had been left out on purpose. I nodded once, as if I understood something that had never been explained to me, and I slowly pulled my hand back from the counter, feeling the absence of contact more than the touch itself. "All right," I said, keeping my voice even. "Careful, the way you speak when you realize raising it would only make things smaller, not bigger." Olivia exhaled, almost imperceptibly, like she had been holding her breath waiting for a scene that never came, and that small release told me more than anything she had said out loud. Ethan shifted beside her, one hand resting casually in his pocket, the other holding a glass of something amber, watching me with the kind of polite indifference reserved for strangers who linger too long. "We can catch up another time," Olivia added, her words smooth, rehearsed, like she had practiced saying them without sounding like she meant them. I studied her face, not searching for guilt, not even disappointment, just looking for something that still connected us. But all I saw was calculation, the quiet kind that measures how a moment will look to other people. Behind her, I noticed a large display set up near the entrance to the dining room, a printed backdrop with their names in gold script, Olivia and Ethan Brooks, and beneath it, a smaller line that read, "Proudly, celebrating 5 years." The logo printed in the corner caught my attention without asking for it. A clean, familiar design I had seen thousands of times over the years, the emblem of Turner Financial Group. For a second, my eyes stayed on it longer than they should have. Not because I did not recognize it, but because I did. I had spent 3 decades inside that system, building numbers that other people would eventually call success, signing off on deals that turned ideas into something that could be measured, funded, approved. I did not say anything about it. Not yet. The host cleared his throat softly, a reminder that I was still standing there occupying a space that had already been decided for someone else, and I stepped back, giving him the room he needed to return to his role. As I turned, I caught a glimpse of one of the servers carrying a tray of champagne flutes, the liquid inside catching the light in a way that made everything look effortless, like none of it required work, sacrifice, or time. I walked toward the exit slowly, not because I needed to, but because I wanted to feel each step, the polished floor under my shoes, the quiet hum of conversations continuing without interruption, the way the door opened automatically as I approached, as if the building itself had been expecting me to leave. Outside, the air felt cooler than before, sharper, like it had been waiting to remind me where I actually stood. I paused just past the entrance, not looking back, just listening for a moment to the muffled sounds from inside, the laughter, the music, the celebration that carried on perfectly without me. In my jacket pocket, my fingers brushed against a folded document I had not planned to bring out tonight, a habit more than anything, something I carried the way some people carry old photographs. I did not take it out. I did not need to. I already knew what it said, and more importantly, what it meant. My phone felt heavier than usual when I pulled it out, the screen lighting up in my hand as if it had been waiting for this exact moment. I scrolled past a few names before stopping on one I had not used in a while, not because it was unimportant, but because it rarely needed to be. For a brief second, I considered putting the phone back in my pocket, letting the night end the way they had decided it would, simple, quiet, forgettable. But then I thought about the way Olivia had said, "we," the way that single word had erased everything that came before it, and I realized this was not about being invited anymore. I tapped the screen once and held the phone to my ear, my voice steady when the line connected. "I need you to review an active funding authorization tied to an event at Brookstone Hall," I said, keeping it direct, specific. There was a pause on the other end, the kind that comes when someone recognizes both the voice and the implication behind it. "Yes, sir." The response came quickly, professional, attentive. I glanced back at the building, not at the people inside, but at the structure itself, the lights, the name, the system holding it all together. "Put a hold on it," I said quietly, almost conversational, like I was discussing something routine. Effective immediately. I ended the call and slipped the phone back into my pocket like nothing significant had just happened, like I had not just shifted something that most people inside that building did not even know existed. For a few seconds, I stood there on the sidewalk, watching the reflection of the restaurant lights in the glass doors, not looking for anyone in particular, just observing the surface, the illusion of stability. Then I turned slightly and moved toward the edge of the parking area, where I could still see through the front windows at an angle, enough to catch movement without being part of it. Inside, everything continued as expected at first. Guests were seated, servers moved in practiced patterns, and the rhythm of the evening carried on untouched, like a machine that had not yet realized a component had been removed. I noticed Olivia taking her place at the center of the long table, Ethan beside her, leaning in as he spoke to someone across from them. His expression relaxed, confident, the kind of ease that comes from believing everything is already secured. A server approached with a tray, distributing drinks, and for a moment, the entire room seemed perfectly balanced. Then it shifted, not dramatically, not all at once, but in small, almost invisible fractures. The same server returned a minute later, this time speaking quietly to another staff member. Their movements slowed, just slightly, and I saw one of them glance toward the manager's office near the back. The music continued. The lighting did not change, but something underneath the surface had started to tighten. I leaned against the side of my car, crossing my arms loosely, not in impatience, just in observation, letting the distance give me clarity I would not have had inside. A few minutes passed before the first visible interruption. A waiter approached Ethan from the side, bending down to speak close to his ear, the way you do when you do not want to draw attention. Ethan's expression shifted, barely, just a tightening around the eyes, a quick glance toward Olivia, and then a nod that suggested he believed whatever issue had come up was minor, manageable. Olivia smiled at someone across the table, lifting her glass, continuing her role without hesitation. But the waiter did not leave immediately. He stayed for a second longer than necessary, and that was enough. I watched as Ethan set his glass down and reached for his phone, his posture changing from relaxed to focused. He tapped the screen once, then again, his jaw setting in a way that did not match the celebration around him. Across the room, the manager emerged from his office, walking with purpose now, not rushed, but deliberate, scanning the tables as if looking for a specific point of contact. When his eyes landed on Ethan and Olivia, he adjusted his jacket and made his way over. Conversations continued. Laughter filled the space. But there was a new layer underneath it now, a quiet thread of uncertainty that had not been there before. The manager leaned in, speaking to them both this time, his tone controlled, professional, but I could see the strain in the way his shoulders held tension. Olivia's smile faded, not completely, but enough to reveal confusion, her brows drawing together as she tried to process what she was hearing. Ethan responded quickly, his voice firmer, more insistent, as if authority alone could correct whatever had gone wrong. The manager nodded, but did not leave. Instead, he gestured subtly toward the front, toward the entrance, toward the system that connected everything inside that room to something much larger than the event itself. I took a slow breath, feeling the night air steady in my lungs, and for the first time since I had arrived, I did not feel out of place. I felt separate, which is not the same thing, and that distinction mattered. A moment later, Olivia turned her head slightly, following the direction of the manager's gesture, her gaze moving toward the front doors, toward the outside, toward where I stood just beyond the glass. She did not see me immediately, but she knew something was there, something that did not fit the version of the evening she had planned. And for the first time that night, I saw uncertainty replace certainty on her face, not loud, not dramatic, just enough to break the surface of what she thought she controlled. The manager's posture changed first, not his words, not his expression, just the way he stood, like someone who had just realized he was no longer dealing with a minor inconvenience, but something structural, something that could not be smoothed over with a quiet apology and a complimentary bottle of wine. He straightened slightly, glanced toward the front desk again, and then back to Ethan, who was now holding his phone tighter, his thumb moving faster across the screen, trying to fix a problem that was not responding the way problems usually did. Olivia leaned in closer, her voice low, her lips barely moving, but I could see the question forming before she even spoke it. This was not part of her plan. This was not supposed to happen tonight. Around them, the table began to notice. Conversation slowed, forks paused midair, glasses hovered just before reaching lips. It was subtle, but it spread, the way tension always does when it enters a room that had been built to avoid it. A second staff member approached the manager, whispering something urgent, and this time the manager did not hide the reaction. His jaw tightened, his eyes flicked toward the entrance again, and then toward the back office, calculating, adjusting, trying to contain something that had already slipped beyond his control. Ethan stood up halfway from his chair, not fully rising, just enough to assert presence, his voice sharper now, more demanding, the tone of someone who believed he had authority here, who believed that money and status should be enough to resolve any situation. The manager listened, nodded once, but did not yield. That was the moment Ethan realized this was not a negotiation. Olivia's composure shifted next. Her shoulders, which had been relaxed, elegant, began to stiffen. She placed her glass down carefully, too carefully, as if precision could restore order. She looked toward the front again, this time longer, her eyes searching for something she could name, something she could understand. Through the glass, she finally saw me. Not clearly at first, just a figure standing outside, still, patient, not leaving. Recognition came slowly, like a thought she did not want to complete. Her expression did not break, but it changed, the confidence softening into something closer to unease. I did not move. I did not wave. I just stood there, exactly where I had been when she told me I did not belong, letting the distance speak for itself. Inside, the manager stepped back from the table and gestured again, this time more firmly, toward the entrance. Another employee moved quickly toward the front desk, picking up the phone, speaking in short, controlled sentences. Systems were being checked, permissions verified, approvals questioned. This was no longer about a reservation. This was about access. Ethan finally pushed his chair back and stood fully, his posture rigid now, his face set in a way that suggested he was trying to maintain control over something that was slipping through his hands. He said something to the manager, slower this time, more deliberate, as if clarity could force a different outcome. The manager responded, equally measured, but there was a finality in his tone, the kind that does not invite further argument. Olivia rose next, not abruptly, but with a kind of careful urgency, smoothing her dress as she stood, her eyes still locked toward the front. She took a step away from the table, then another, moving toward the entrance as if drawn by something she could no longer ignore. The guests watched now, openly, the performance shifting from celebration to something else, something unscripted. As she approached the glass doors, the distance between us closed, not physically at first, but in understanding. She stopped just inside, her hand hovering near the handle, hesitating for a fraction of a second before pushing it open. The door moved silently, the same way it had when I left, and the night air slipped inside behind her. She stepped out, the light from the restaurant framing her from behind, and for the first time that evening, she looked at me without an audience between us. "Dad?" she said, her voice lower now, stripped of the careful tone she had used before, replaced by something less certain, something searching. I held her gaze, steady, calm, not raising my voice, not stepping forward. "It seems like your event is having a problem," I said, my words simple, almost observational, like I was describing the weather. She swallowed, her eyes flicking briefly back toward the room, where the manager was now speaking to Ethan again, where the rhythm of the evening had clearly broken. "What is going on?" she asked, and there it was, not accusation, not yet, but the beginning of a realization she had not prepared for. I let a small pause sit between us, not for effect, but because the answer did not need to be rushed. "Access," I said finally, my voice even. "Sometimes it depends on who is actually behind it." Olivia held my gaze for a moment longer than she had before, like she was trying to read something in my face that had never been there when she was younger, something she had never needed to look for until now. The confidence she had carried inside that room did not follow her out here, not fully. It stayed behind with the lights and the music and the people who believed they understood what was happening. "What do you mean by that?" she asked, her voice quieter now, not weak, just careful, like every word needed to be placed correctly. I did not answer immediately. Instead, I looked past her for a second, through the glass doors where the room had shifted again. The manager was no longer standing still. He was moving between tables, speaking to staff, coordinating something that was no longer routine. Ethan was still on his phone, but his posture had changed completely. He was no longer leaning back or smiling. He was standing rigid, one hand pressed against the table, the other holding the phone close to his ear, his voice sharp, insistent, but not in control. Olivia followed my glance without turning fully, her attention split between me and the room she had just stepped out of. "They said there is a problem with the payment authorization," she continued, faster now, like saying it out loud would make it simpler. "That does not make sense. Everything was confirmed weeks ago." I nodded slightly, not in agreement, just acknowledging the statement. "Confirmed," I repeated, letting the words sit for a moment. "Yes, that is usually how these things start." She frowned, a small crease forming between her brows, the kind she used to have when she was trying to solve a problem she did not fully understand yet. I recognized it instantly. It had not changed. "Dad?" she said again, this time with a hint of urgency. "If you know something, just tell me." I reached into my jacket pocket slowly, not to make a point, not to dramatize anything, just because the moment had arrived where silence would no longer carry the message. The paper inside was folded cleanly, edges still sharp from when I had placed it there earlier that day without much thought. I pulled it out and held it between my fingers for a second before unfolding it. It was not a long document, not complicated, just a standard authorization agreement, the kind that never gets attention until something goes wrong. Her eyes dropped to it instinctively, drawn by the movement, by the fact that I had something tangible in my hand, while everything inside was starting to feel unstable. "This is the active funding authorization for tonight," I said, keeping my voice even, steady, the way I had learned to speak after years of explaining things to people who did not want to hear them. "The one tied to Turner Financial." She blinked, her gaze moving across the page, not reading every word, but recognizing enough. "Names, numbers, signatures." Her name was there. Ethan's name was there. And then there was mine. She stopped on that. Not dramatically. Not with a gasp or a step back. Just a pause, a stillness that replaced the movement in her eyes. "You," she started, but the word did not finish itself. I did not interrupt her. I let her look. I let her connect the pieces at her own pace, because this was not information she had been missing. It was information she had chosen not to consider. The initial approval went through under my authorization, I said calmly. And the continuity clause requires that authorization to remain active. Her eyes lifted from the paper to my face again, slower this time, like she was seeing me from a different angle, one she had not used before. Are you saying, she began again, and this time she finished it, even if the words came out uncertain, that this is happening because of you? I held her gaze, not with anger, not with satisfaction, just with clarity. I am saying, I replied, that systems do not fail on their own. They respond to changes in control. Behind her, the glass doors opened again, and the manager stepped halfway outside, scanning the area until his eyes landed on me. The recognition was immediate. Not confusion, not curiosity, recognition. He straightened his posture without realizing it, like someone who had just identified the source of a problem that could not be handled internally. Olivia noticed the shift before she understood it. She turned slightly, just enough to see the way the manager was looking past her, not at Ethan, but at me. And that was when the distance between who she thought I was and who I actually was began to close, not with noise, not with confrontation, but with something much quieter and far more difficult to ignore. The manager stopped just outside the door, not fully stepping into the night, but far enough that the separation between inside and outside no longer protected anyone from what was unfolding. His eyes moved from me to the paper in my hand, then back to me again, and there was no hesitation left in his expression. Mr. Turner, he said, his tone respectful, measured, carrying a different weight than anything he had used earlier that evening. Olivia heard it clearly. I saw it land on her before she even turned her head. The way a name spoken in the wrong context can change everything about a moment. She looked back at him slowly, then at me again, and something in her posture shifted, not dramatically, but enough to show that the ground under her assumptions was no longer steady. You know him? She asked, though the question already carried its own answer. The manager did not respond to her immediately. His attention remained on me, waiting, not for instruction exactly, but for direction, the kind that does not come from position alone, but from authority that has been established long before the current situation. We are experiencing an issue with the event authorization, he said carefully, choosing each word like it needed to hold up under pressure. It appears the funding line has been placed on hold pending confirmation. I nodded once, acknowledging the accuracy of his statement without elaborating on it. Olivia took a small step closer to me, the distance she had maintained earlier now feeling less intentional and more uncertain. Dad, she said, quieter this time, not trying to control the situation anymore, just trying to understand it. You did this. I did not answer right away. Instead, I folded the document in my hand slowly, deliberately, returning it to my jacket pocket as if putting something back into place rather than taking it out. I responded. I said finally, my voice even, not raised, not softened, just clear. To a change. She blinked, processing that, her eyes searching my face for something familiar, something she could still hold on to. A change, she repeated, the words sounding different now, heavier. I held her gaze, steady, not unkind, but not retreating either. You told me there was no room for me. I said, not accusing, not dramatic, just stating what had happened. That I was not part of this. Behind her, through the glass, I could see Ethan moving toward the entrance now, his steps faster, less controlled, his phone still in his hand, his attention split between the screen and the situation he could no longer ignore. The room inside had fully shifted at this point. Conversations had stopped pretending to continue. People were watching openly now, not just the table, but the doors, the space where the evening had started to come apart. That is not what I meant, Olivia said quickly, the first hint of defensiveness breaking through, but it did not carry the same certainty it would have earlier. It was just the guest list, the space. We had to. She stopped herself, hearing how it sounded before finishing it. I did not interrupt her. I let the silence that followed do the work instead. The manager remained where he was, waiting, not moving forward, not stepping back, understanding that whatever came next would define how the situation resolved. Ethan reached the door and pushed it open, stepping out into the night with a force that contrasted sharply with the quiet control I had maintained. He looked at me first, not recognizing me fully, not placing me yet, just seeing me as the source of something he could not fix. Then he looked at Olivia, then at the manager, his expression tightening as he tried to connect the pieces in real time. "What is going on?" he demanded, his voice sharp, controlled but strained, the kind of tone that expects immediate answers. The manager glanced at me briefly before responding, and that glance did not go unnoticed. Ethan saw it. Olivia saw it. And in that brief exchange, something unspoken became visible. "The authorization for this event has been suspended," the manager said, his tone still professional, but now carrying a finality that was difficult to argue with. "We are currently unable to proceed without reinstatement." Ethan's eyes moved back to me, narrowing slightly, trying to assess, to understand why the situation seemed to revolve around someone he had not even acknowledged minutes earlier. "And that depends on who?" he asked, the question directed at the manager but answered by the way the manager looked at me again. I did not step forward. I did not raise my voice. I simply met his gaze, calm, steady, and let the answer exist in the space between us without needing to be spoken out loud. Ethan did not like silence. Not this kind. Not the kind that did not respond to pressure or tone or posture, and I could see it in the way his jaw tightened just slightly as he waited for someone to say something that would restore the balance he was used to controlling. When no one did, he took a step closer, shifting his weight forward as if proximity alone would force clarity. "Look," he said, directing his words toward me now, no longer pretending I was not part of the situation. "If there is some kind of misunderstanding, we can fix it. Just tell them to lift the hold so we can get back to the event." His voice was measured, but there was an edge underneath it, the kind that appears when confidence starts to feel like risk. I did not move. I did not mirror his step. I just stood where I was, letting the distance remain exactly what it had been. "You said there was no room," I replied calmly, not raising my voice, not adding emphasis, just repeating the fact that had set everything in motion. He exhaled through his nose, a short breath, not quite patience, not quite frustration. "That was about seating," he said quickly. "That is all. This has nothing to do with that." I held his gaze for a moment, steady, then let it shift briefly to Olivia before returning to him. "Everything has to do with that," I said. Olivia took another step forward, closer than before, the space between us now small enough that I could see the details in her expression without effort, the uncertainty, the calculation, the attempt to recover something she had already given away. "Dad, please," she said, and this time there was no performance in her voice, no careful tone for an audience, just something rawer, more immediate. "We can talk about this later. Just fix this now. People are watching." I glanced past her again, through the glass, where the room had fully shifted into observation. Conversations had stopped entirely. Guests were no longer pretending to focus on their meals. They were watching the entrance, watching the break in the evening, waiting for resolution. "They were watching before," I said quietly, bringing my attention back to her. "You just did not mind then." The words did not land loudly, but they settled heavily enough. She did not respond right away. She did not argue. She just looked at me, and for a brief second, I saw the memory pass through her, not as a clear image, but as recognition, something she could not ignore even if she wanted to. Ethan shifted again, less patient now. "This is not necessary," he said, his tone firmer, more direct. "You are making a point at the worst possible time." I considered that for a moment, not because I agreed, but because it was accurate in a way he did not intend. Timing always matters. That is what I had learned over years of decisions that carried weight far beyond the moment they were made. "No," I said, my voice still even, still controlled. "I am responding at the only time it matters." The manager remained just behind them, not interrupting, not stepping forward, but present enough that his role in the situation was clear. He was waiting for direction, not from Ethan, not from Olivia, but from me. That, more than anything else, shifted the dynamic. Olivia saw it fully now. Her eyes moved between the manager and me, then back again, connecting the line she had not seen earlier. "You are the one authorizing this," she said, not as a question this time, but as a realization she could not avoid. I nodded once, not dramatically, just confirming what was already understood. "And you stopped it," she added, her voice quieter again, not accusing, not yet, just stating the fact the way I had earlier. I paused it. I corrected gently. "There is a difference. Ethan let out a short, disbelieving breath, shaking his head slightly. "This is unbelievable," he muttered, more to himself than to us. All of this over a misunderstanding about seating. I did not respond to him directly. Instead, I looked at Olivia, holding her gaze long enough that she had to choose whether to look away or stay with it. She did not look away this time. "It was not about the seat," I said quietly. "It was about the place." And in that moment, with the room behind her watching, with the manager waiting, with Ethan no longer in control, the meaning of that difference settled into the space between us in a way that could not be undone. Olivia did not speak right away after that. She just stood there, close enough that I could see the way her breathing had changed, slightly faster now, not out of panic, but out of the effort it takes to hold together a version of reality that is starting to come apart. She looked back through the glass again, longer this time, not just noticing the room, but studying it, the guests, the staff, the manager, the way everything had shifted into something she no longer fully controlled. Then her eyes moved to Ethan. He was still standing near the doorway, but he was no longer leading anything. He was reacting, trying to contain, trying to reassert something that was already gone. "You could have just talked to me," she said finally, her voice lower, steadier, but carrying something new, not quite accusation, not quite regret, just a need to find a path that did not end here. I considered that, not dismissing it, but not accepting it either. "I did," I said quietly. "At the door." The words were simple, but they landed in a way that made her pause again. She remembered it. Not just the moment, but the tone, the decision behind it, the way she had chosen how that interaction would go. Ethan stepped closer now, inserting himself back into the space, his presence more deliberate, more controlled than before, like he was trying to rebuild authority one movement at a time. "This is getting out of hand," he said, his voice firm again, but it did not carry the same weight it had earlier. "We have people inside waiting. Contracts, reservations, staff. This is not something you can just pause because you feel slighted." I turned my head slightly toward him, not fully, just enough to acknowledge him without shifting my position. "It is not about feeling," I said. "It is about structure." He let out a short breath, almost a laugh, but there was no humor in it. "Structure," he repeated. "It is a dinner, not a corporate acquisition." I held his gaze for a second longer this time. Not confrontational, just steady. "Everything that depends on authorization is structure," I replied. "You just do not notice it when it works." Olivia's attention snapped back to me at that, something in the phrasing catching her in a way the earlier statements had not. She knew that tone. She had heard it before, years ago, when she would sit at the kitchen table while I reviewed documents late at night, explaining things she did not fully understand yet, but listened to anyway. "This was never just a dinner," she said slowly, almost to herself, the realization forming as she spoke it. I did not answer. I did not need to. The truth of it was already in front of her. Behind them, the manager took a small step forward, just enough to be included without interrupting. "Mr. Turner," he said carefully, "if there is a possibility of reinstating the authorization, we can resume service immediately." His tone was respectful, but there was urgency underneath it now, not just for the business, but for the situation as a whole. I glanced at him briefly, then back to Olivia. "There is always a possibility," I said. "The question is what changes." Olivia swallowed, her eyes holding mine, not looking away this time, not deflecting. "What do you want?" she asked, and the question was different now. It was not about fixing the event. It was about understanding the cost of restoring it. I let a small pause settle between us, not to make her wait, but to let the question exist fully before answering it. "I want clarity," I said finally, "about where I stand." Ethan shifted again, impatience returning, but less controlled now. "You are her father," he said, as if stating it would resolve everything. I did not look at him. "That is a title," I replied, "not a position." Olivia's expression changed at that, not dramatically, but enough that I saw something break through, something she had been holding back, something she had not wanted to confront until now. She glanced once more at the room behind her, at the people waiting, the event suspended in a moment that was no longer theirs to control, and then she looked back at me, fully this time, without distance, without performance. "You are not outside," she said quietly, the words slow, deliberate, like she was choosing them carefully. "You never were." I held her gaze, not responding immediately, letting her continue if she wanted to. She took a small breath, steadying herself. I was wrong, she added, not loudly, not for anyone else to hear, just enough for the words to exist between us. And in that moment, with the night air still and the room behind her waiting, the first real shift did not come from the system, or the manager, or the authority that had paused everything. It came from her, from the acknowledgement she had avoided until there was no version of the situation left where she could ignore it. For a moment, nothing moved between us after she said it. The words did not fix anything, not immediately, but they changed the shape of the space we were standing in. I watched her closely, not searching for perfection, not expecting a sudden transformation, just looking for whether she understood what she had just admitted. Her eyes did not drift away this time. They stayed with mine, steady, even if there was uncertainty behind them. That mattered more than anything she could have said earlier inside that room. Ethan did not share that stillness. I could feel his impatience building beside her, not loud, not explosive, but present, pressing against the moment like something that needed to be resolved quickly, neatly, without cost. So that is it, he said, his voice controlled but tight. An apology, and we are done here? You can turn everything back on. I turned my head slightly toward him, acknowledging the question without giving it the weight he expected. This is not a switch, I said calmly. It is a decision. He exhaled again, sharper this time, running a hand briefly through his hair before letting it fall back to his side. Then make it, he replied. Because right now, everything inside is on hold. Staff is waiting, guests are waiting, and we are standing out here like this is some kind of negotiation. I let his words settle for a second, not because they affected me, but because they revealed exactly how he saw the situation. A transaction, a problem to be solved quickly so things could return to normal. Olivia heard it too. I saw it in the way her expression shifted again, not away from me, but slightly away from him. It is not just about tonight, she said quietly, and that was the first time she had said something that moved in the same direction as the truth instead of around it. Ethan looked at her, surprised, not expecting that. What does that even mean? He asked, his tone softening just enough to show confusion under the control. She did not answer him right away. Instead, she looked back at me, holding the connection that had been missing earlier. You said it was about place, she continued, her voice steady now, even if it was quieter. Not just a seat. I nodded once, not encouraging, not correcting, just acknowledging that she was following the line. She took a small breath, like she was stepping into something she had avoided. I made it clear you were outside, she said, the words slower now, more deliberate. And everything that depends on you responded to that. There was no accusation in her voice when she said it, just recognition, and that mattered more than anything else in that moment. Ethan shifted again, less certain now, his eyes moving between us as if trying to find a position that still gave him control. This is getting blown out of proportion, he said, but the words did not carry the same confidence they had before. I did not respond to him. I stayed with Olivia. Clarity, she said, repeating the word I had used earlier, testing it, understanding it. That is what you wanted. I held her gaze. Yes. She nodded slightly, almost to herself, and then glanced back toward the restaurant one more time. Through the glass, the room was still paused, still waiting, but now it looked different, not like something she owned, but something suspended, something dependent. When she turned back to me, there was less hesitation in her eyes. You are not outside, she said again, more firmly this time, not just acknowledging it, but stating it as fact. You never were. I let a brief silence follow that, not to challenge it, but to let it stand on its own. The manager shifted slightly behind them, still waiting, still present, understanding that whatever came next would resolve more than just an event. Ethan looked at me again, his posture no longer as rigid, the edge in his voice reduced, replaced by something closer to caution. So what now? He asked, not demanding this time, but asking, even if he did not realize the difference. I glanced once more at the glass doors, at the room that had been so certain of itself an hour ago, then back at Olivia. Now, I said calmly, we decide whether that understanding holds when it actually matters. Olivia did not answer immediately after that. She just stood there, holding the weight of what I had said, not trying to move past it this time, not trying to simplify it into something easier to fix. I could see it in the way her posture changed, The way she was no longer balancing between two positions, no longer trying to maintain both the version of the evening she had planned and the reality that had interrupted it. She had to choose now, not later, not privately, but here, with everything watching. She turned slightly, looking back through the glass doors again, and this time she did not just observe the room, she saw it differently. The table, the guests, the staff, all of it still in place, but no longer self-sustaining. It was waiting, not for the schedule, not for the service, but for a decision. Ethan followed her gaze, but he did not see the same thing. I could tell by the way his eyes moved quickly, scanning for solutions, for angles, for ways to restore control without changing anything underneath. "Olivia," he said, quieter now, not as forceful as before, but still pressing. "We can deal with this after. Just ask him to put it back so we can finish the night." She did not respond right away. She kept looking inside, taking it in, and then slowly turned back to me. There was something different in her eyes now, not just recognition, but responsibility. That was the part she had avoided earlier. "If you restore it," she said carefully, her voice steady but deliberate, "then everything goes back to normal." I did not interrupt. I let her continue. "The dinner continues, the guests stay, nothing changes from what they see." She paused there, just long enough to acknowledge the implication before finishing. But that would not be honest. Ethan shifted beside her, the word landing in a way he did not like. "This is not about honesty," he said quickly. "This is about not ruining the event." Olivia glanced at him, and for the first time, she did not follow his lead. "It has already changed," she replied quietly. "You just cannot see it yet." He looked at her, surprised, not expecting that answer, not expecting her to step away from the version of the situation he was trying to preserve. She turned back to me fully then, not halfway, not cautiously, but directly. "You asked for clarity," she said, and now there was no hesitation in her voice. "So here it is." She took a small breath, steadying herself, not for me, but for the moment itself. "You are not outside. Not tonight. Not in this family. Not in anything that depends on me." The words were simple, but they carried weight because of where they were said, because of when they were said, and because she did not soften them for anyone else listening. I held her gaze, not responding immediately, letting the statement settle fully before moving forward. Behind her, I saw the manager shift again, sensing that the resolution was close, that the structure of the evening was about to either be restored or replaced entirely. Ethan looked between us again, less certain now, his earlier confidence reduced to something more cautious, more aware of what he had not understood before. "So that is it?" he asked, not demanding this time, just trying to confirm what was happening. I glanced at him briefly, then back to Olivia. "Clarity holds when it costs something," I said calmly. "Otherwise it is just words." Olivia nodded once, not defensively, not reluctantly, just accepting the truth of that. She did not look back at the room this time. She stayed where she was, with me, in the space that had been denied earlier. That mattered. I reached into my pocket again, pulling out my phone, the same one I had used minutes earlier, and unlocked it without hurry. The screen lit up, the number still there, waiting. I did not make the call immediately. I looked at her one more time, giving her the space to step back if she wanted to retreat into something easier. She did not. That was all I needed. I lifted the phone to my ear and spoke in the same steady tone I had used before. "Reinstate the authorization," I said simply. There was a brief pause on the other end, then a confirmation. "Yes, sir." I ended the call and lowered the phone, slipping it back into my pocket without ceremony. Inside, the shift was almost immediate. Staff moved again, faster now. Conversations resumed, not fully at first, but enough to rebuild the rhythm. The manager exhaled, tension leaving his posture as he turned back toward the room, already adjusting, already restoring what had been paused. But it was not the same. It could not be. Olivia knew it. I knew it. Even Ethan, standing there beside her, felt it, even if he did not fully understand it. I stepped past them toward the entrance, not waiting to be invited this time, not asking for space. The door opened, just as it had before, but the difference was not in the mechanism. It was in the fact that no one stood in the way. I stepped into the room without hesitation, and the difference was immediate, not because the space had changed physically, but because the meaning of my presence had. Conversations resumed as I crossed the threshold, but they were quieter now, more measured, like people were recalibrating in real time, unsure of what exactly had shifted but certain that something had. The manager moved quickly to meet me, his posture straight, his tone respectful in a way that was no longer just professional courtesy. "Mr. Turner," he said again, this time with full acknowledgement, "everything has been restored. We are ready to proceed whenever you are." I nodded once, not giving the moment more weight than necessary, and continued walking toward the main table. Olivia followed a step behind me, not leading, not directing, just present in a way she had not been earlier. Ethan came as well, but his pace was different now, less certain, his attention moving between the room and me, trying to understand how the position he thought he held had shifted so completely. As I approached the table, the guests watched openly. There was no pretending now. They had seen enough to know that whatever had paused the evening had not been a simple mistake. A few people straightened in their seats, others lowered their voices, but no one looked away entirely. I reached the table and paused for a second, taking in the place settings, the empty chair that had not been intended for me, the careful arrangement that had excluded me without discussion. Then I pulled the chair back and sat down. No one stopped me. No one questioned it. The action itself was simple, but it carried a finality that words would not have. Olivia took her seat beside me, not across the table, not at a distance, but directly next to me, closing the gap that had been created earlier. She did not speak immediately. She just sat there, her posture composed, but different, grounded in a way that was not about appearance anymore. Ethan hesitated for a moment before sitting as well, his movements slower, more deliberate, like he was adjusting to a structure he had not realized existed. The manager gave a small nod and stepped away, signaling to the staff that service could resume. Plates were brought out again, glasses refilled, the rhythm of the evening rebuilt piece by piece, but it was not the same rhythm as before. It could not be. The foundation had shifted. A woman across the table, someone I recognized vaguely from earlier glimpses, leaned slightly toward Olivia. "Everything okay?" she asked quietly, her tone polite but curious, the kind that carries more questions than it asks. Olivia glanced at her, then at me, and for a brief second, I saw the choice happen again, not as dramatic as before, but just as important. "Yes," she said simply, her voice calm, steady. "Everything is clear now." The woman nodded, accepting the answer even if she did not fully understand it, and leaned back in her seat. I reached for the glass in front of me, lifting it slightly, not to make a statement, not to draw attention, just to participate in the moment that had been withheld earlier. The liquid caught the light the same way it had when I first walked in, but it looked different now, not because it had changed, but because the context had. Olivia turned slightly toward me, her voice low enough that only I could hear it. "I should have said something sooner," she said, not as an excuse, not as a way to undo what had happened, just as a recognition of it. I did not respond immediately. I took a small sip, setting the glass back down before looking at her. "You said it when it mattered," I replied. She nodded once, accepting that, not pushing further. Across the table, Ethan remained quiet, his usual ease replaced by observation, by the need to reassess something he had not considered before. He was not the center of the room anymore. He was part of it, and that difference was not lost on him. The evening continued, conversation slowly returning, laughter resurfacing in smaller, more cautious ways, but there was a new awareness underneath it all, a recognition that what had happened could not be unseen. I sat there, not claiming the moment, not drawing attention to it, just present in a way that did not need to be announced. Because this was never about being seen for a single night. It was about not being erased from the structure that had always been there, even when they chose not to look at it. The dinner resumed, but it did not return to what it had been before. There was a subtle shift in the way people spoke, in the way they looked at the table, in the way they measured their words. It was not discomfort exactly, and it was not curiosity alone. It was awareness, the kind that settles into a room after something real has happened, something that cannot be undone by pretending it never occurred. I noticed it in the pauses between conversations, in the way guests occasionally glanced toward me and then away, not out of judgment, but out of recalibration. They were adjusting to a presence they had not accounted for earlier. Olivia felt it too. I could tell by the way she carried herself now, not with the careful performance she had maintained at the start of the evening, but with something steadier, something less concerned with how it looked, and more focused on what it meant. She spoke when spoken to, responded when needed, but there was a quiet attention in her now, a sense that she was no longer dividing herself between two versions of the moment. She had chosen, and she was holding that choice. Ethan remained quieter than before. He participated, nodded, answered questions, but his usual ease had not returned. He was watching more than speaking, observing the room, the table, me. Every now and then, his eyes would settle for a second longer than necessary, as if he was trying to understand how something so fundamental had gone unnoticed by him until tonight. Across the table, one of the older guests leaned forward slightly, lifting his glass with a polite smile. "To 5 years," he said, his tone warm, inviting the table back into a shared rhythm. Glasses were raised, including mine. Olivia turned slightly toward me again, just enough to include me in the motion without making it a display. "To 5 years," she echoed, her voice steady, and when our glasses touched, it was quiet, almost unnoticeable, but intentional. I did not say anything beyond the toast. I did not need to. The acknowledgement was already there. The service continued, plates replaced, courses brought out in sequence, the structure of the evening restored on the surface, but underneath, the foundation had been adjusted. I noticed the manager once or twice at a distance, his attention still attentive, but no longer tense. The system was stable again, not because it had returned to what it was, but because the variables had been clarified. At one point, Olivia reached for her glass, then paused, her hand resting lightly against the stem. "There is something I need to say," she said quietly, not loud enough to interrupt the entire table, but enough for those closest to hear. A few conversations nearby softened, not stopping entirely, but shifting just enough to allow space. She did not stand. She did not raise her voice. She stayed seated, grounded in the moment she was choosing to address. "I made a mistake earlier," she continued, her tone calm, not defensive, not overly emotional, just clear. "I handled something poorly, and it affected how this evening started." There was no elaboration beyond that, no details, no attempt to explain it away, just the acknowledgement. The table absorbed it in different ways. Some nodded slightly, others looked down at their plates, a few exchanged brief glances, but no one challenged it. No one questioned it. The simplicity of the statement made it difficult to dismiss. Ethan looked at her, surprised again, but he did not interrupt. He did not correct. He let it stand, even if it was not the version of the evening he would have chosen to present. Olivia then turned her head just slightly toward me, not enough to draw attention, but enough that I felt the gesture. "And I am glad it was addressed," she added quietly. "That was all. No more. No less." I inclined my head slightly in response, not as a performance, not to draw attention, just to acknowledge that she had followed through on what she had chosen outside. The dinner moved forward after that, conversation gradually finding a new rhythm, one that did not ignore what had happened, but incorporated it, adjusted to it. And as I sat there, listening, observing, participating when appropriate, I realized that nothing about the evening had been restored to what it was before. It had been reset to something else entirely, something built on clarity instead of assumption. And that, more than the dinner itself, was the part that would last. The evening began to wind down in a way that felt quieter than it should have, not because anything was missing, but because everything had already been said in the ways that mattered. Plates were cleared, glasses were emptied, conversations softened into smaller circles, and the energy that had once been directed outward now turned inward, reflective, measured. I remained seated for a while longer, not out of obligation, but because leaving too quickly would have made it seem like the night had only been about what happened at the door. It was not. It had become something else entirely. Olivia stayed beside me, not speaking much, but not drifting away either. That, more than anything, told me the shift had held. Every now and then, she would glance toward me, not to check, not to ask, just to confirm that the distance she had created earlier had not returned. Ethan spoke occasionally, engaging with guests, maintaining the structure of the evening as best he could, but there was a restraint in him now, a recognition that control did not always come from being the loudest voice in the room. When I finally stood, it was without announcement, without drawing attention. The chair moved back with a soft sound against the floor, and that was enough for Olivia to notice. She stood as well, not out of formality, but instinct. You are leaving? She asked quietly. I nodded once. It is a long drive back, I said, keeping it simple, the same way I had kept everything else that night. She hesitated for a second, as if deciding whether to say more, then stepped slightly closer. I meant what I said, she added, her voice low, steady, not for anyone else to hear. I know, I replied. That was all it needed to be. No lecture. No reminder. Just acknowledgement. Ethan approached then, slower than before, his expression different now, less guarded, more aware. Thank you for handling this the way you did, he said, choosing his words carefully, not fully comfortable, but genuine enough to matter. I looked at him for a moment, not evaluating, not judging, just seeing him clearly for the first time that night. It was handled, I said. He nodded once, accepting that, even if he did not fully understand everything behind it. I turned toward the exit, walking the same path I had taken earlier, but it did not feel the same. The door opened again as I approached, just as it had before, but this time there was no hesitation on either side of it. Outside, the night air was still, cooler now, quieter. I walked to my car, the distance feeling shorter than it had when I arrived. Before getting in, I glanced back once, not at the people, not at the table, but at the building itself, the place where everything had shifted. Then I got into the driver's seat, closed the door, and started the engine. As I pulled away, the lights of the restaurant receded in the rearview mirror, becoming smaller, less defined, until they were just part of the background again. The road ahead was empty, steady, familiar, and as the miles passed, I did not replay the moment at the door, or the conversation outside, or even the dinner itself. I thought about something simpler, about how easily a place can be taken away with a single sentence, and how quietly it can be restored, not by force, not by volume, but by clarity. They had believed they could decide where I stood. Tonight, they learned that position is not given by invitation. It is defined by what everything else depends on, whether they choose to see it or not.